You cannot copy paste your way to elite performance. You need to break your own problems down to their own basic elements and then reassemble them from the ground up. And that starts with understanding who you are and where you're optimized, because that will dictate the goals you pursue and the way you pursue them.
So I'm sitting down with James King, who is an excellence coach, peak performance coach, who's going to talk about how to really thrive in trading. He's worked with fund managers, a bunch of institutions too, private equity firms. So looking forward to talking with you, James, and about how we can actually perform better in trading. Good to be here today, of course.
Oh, mate, I'm delighted to chat to you guys today, Etienne. Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun.
All right, so tell me first about kind of who you are and how did you get into peak performance and teaching people how to perform at their best?
Okay, yeah, that's a sensible place to start. Like, look, put simplest, yeah, you nailed it. My role's I would describe as a peak performance expert. And my role is to put you, the performer, under the conditions that enable you to win your race. And I use the term to accelerate excellence. And by accelerate, I mean increase in rate, amount, and extent. Excellence, the quality of being outstanding. Whether that's the athlete aiming to win a world title or the sort of super trader aiming to level up and absolutely dominate his market. The principles of elite performance are the same. Ultimately, we're working with the same equipment, human brain and body. And the way I look at it is everyone sat there listening to this, myself, yourself, including Etienne, we're like this lump of stone, right? And inside it exists this fucking masterpiece. And my role is to help the individual carve away strategically with a ton of effort and offensive spirit to reveal that piece of work. And we do that through applying everything we know about the science of human performance. And for me, look, as long as I can remember, I have been obsessed with elite performance. I was reading biographies of athletes like Beckham, military commanders like British Special Forces Commander Sir Peter de la Billiere, or entrepreneurs like Branson, investors like Buffett. It's always just something that's gripped me. And the question that fundamentally struck me as a kid really was this: why? What is it that enables them to perform at those upper limits of human potentials? And then most importantly, is any of this even controllable? And that led me on my quest to almost work this shit out. And then I was fortunate enough to spend time at the University of Edinburgh. I didn't want to go to university. I had no interest, but I managed to get decent grades. And my mum and my head of sixth form staged an intervention. And I went to look at Edinburgh up in Scotland. And have you heard that feeling where your brain's just telling you you're in the right place? I had that feeling when I was at Edinburgh University, and I spent 5 years there studying performance science. Mate, it was nuts. Like that first week of lectures, I'm sat there, 3 lectures in particular. One was the introduction to excellence, an introduction to mastery, and an introduction to the philosophy of science. And I'm just sitting in this classroom, like looking left and right. I'm like, oh my God, did you hear that? My hand's going up in the air. And I'm just like, as far as I'm concerned, this should have been breaking news. And I couldn't understand why every super trader, military commander, sports manager, politician is not in that room leveraging the science. And unfortunately, like most science or academia is really bad at translating it. It's messy, it's like complex, it's hard to understand. But I guess I've spent the last sort of 15, 20 years taking that science and applying it in some of the most demanding and elite performance environments to find out what really stands up to the rigors of elite performance. And I've been privileged to do that in, areas within the elite military. I've been personally through some of the most toughest sort of military selection processes that have taught me so much about these principles and how it actually feels to apply them when you're there in that moment and you're trying to say, master the art of not panicking, or trying to summon every ounce of confidence or motivation, resilience you can to deal with the task at hand. I then had a lot of experience, again, doing the same thing within trading and investing. And I guess that all came up through a chance meeting. Well, not a chance meeting, a chance dinner at Nobu in London. I'd never eaten at a restaurant like that. And I had a meeting with an ex-Goldman Sachs super trader. His name's Muafak Salti, nickname Alf. And this guy, he generates hundreds of millions a year on the bounce. And he was like us, right? He's self-improving. He listens to podcasts like this. He's always looking for an edge. And he was convinced that the whole trading setup could be done better than it was at the investment banks. He'd worked at Goldman, JP, Morgan Stanley, and he wanted to do it on his own. And one of the problems he was encountering was this: well, how do I download my expertise and upload it into others to scale his talent, almost download the software and then upload it into these individuals with superior hardware and scale it into the markets? And of course, that's what I'd studied. A big part of what I'd studied and learned was this: well, how do we identify superstars that aren't superstars yet? How do we accelerate the rate of development for individuals to maximize that development trajectory in terms of ability across time? How do we inject our levels of intensity, motivation, and confidence into the rest of our team? I mean, but up until this point, of course, for me, it was just optimistic theories, copy pasting from experiences, things I've seen, and theory from what I'd studied. But long and short, that after that dinner, Alf basically, we riffed for hours on what we could do. He told me where he perceived the banks were going wrong, and like almost any organization I see, they're leaking progress everywhere. And he basically gave me the keys and was like, align this organization, it was Mandara Capital at the time, with everything we can to stack probability in the favor of our success. And that's what I did. And it turned out to be a good decision. Like in less than 3 years, we went from sort of zero to trading more barrels of oil a day than BP, Glencore, Shell. And it was a real success story. Alf ended up on a beach in Singapore, and I was in a 3-man management team in an acting CEO role running that company, and it was an incredible opportunity for me. And I fell head over heels in love with trading and investing because, number one, you're working with some of the smartest, hardest working individuals on the planet. And number two, you can measure everything. So as the performance scientist in me, it was just perfect. And concurrent to all that, I've been used as like a sledgehammer in elite sports. So I'm lucky I work with some of the best sports teams and athletes in the world. And my role is to go in and, just almost listen to what they're trying to achieve, stand back, watch, then hold the mirror out, and again, hit them with a sledgehammer in terms of where they're leaking progress and what they can do about it.
When you think of like an athlete to, let's say, like a hedge fund manager or like a trader, do they face the same issues, or is it like different things that they have to work on?
Yeah, well, look, there's two key aspects to performance, right? You've got the technical aspect, which is skill. So, of course, the context is different between, say, an elite athlete and an elite trader. However, the process of designing world-class training to acquire world-class skill in the individual is exactly the same. So as far as I'm concerned, like the principles that drive elite technical ability, whether you're a trader, investor, special forces operator, they're exactly the same. The other aspect, of course, is the psychological bit. And everyone talks a lot about psychology, but they don't really. I mean, sports teams are the worst, mate. I go into these sports teams, they're like, oh, it's all about mindset, it's all this, it's all that. And then I'm like, okay, well, show me what you're doing about it. Because when they talk about the technical aspects or the physical aspects, I see the trainer, I see them in the gym, I see them doing the back squat, the bench press. I'm like, well, you're talking about psychology all the time. Like, show me what you do. And there's nothing. And that's a big part of what my role is. And like, whether you're a trader, whether you're an athlete, and there's 3 key psychological skills you're going to have to master if you're going to perform, let alone perform at the upper limits of what you're capable of. And the first one is that, when it's time to compete or time to train, you must be able to flick the switch. I describe it as the on switch. So you need to be able to put out on full power in terms of your intention and energy, and you need to be able to channel that focus and attention and energy on the task at hand as if it were like, think charged fire hose, but through the eye of a needle on the task at hand. Whether that's the SF operator taking the shot, whether it's the trader, focusing on his risk, his position, what's going on in the market, listening to brokers, he's just immersed in that. He's not thinking about what he's going to have for dinner. He's not thinking about something that happened on the weekend. He's not thinking about what went on with his partner. He's here, there, in the present, accessing everything. And the reason that's so important, by the way, is that when we flick that on switch and access what I would refer to as blue head performance state, you might hear it referred to as a flow state, your brain releases 6 neurochemicals that drive all elite performance. So we're talking dopamine, serotonin, anandamide, oxytocin, endorphins, norepinephrine. And these neurochemicals do 2 things. First is they unlock your psychological firepower. They give you complete access to your confidence, motivation, resilience that we all know drives elite performance. And secondly, this is really important. all your skills are stored in your brain as mental structures. They're like complex lattice works of information, like a spider's webs. And I can literally scan an advanced trader's brain versus a novice, and you can get them to trade. And you can see the neurons fire, and you can see the advanced trader will be the one who has the most sophisticated, complex mental structures. It'll be like a big, thick, messy spider's web, something like disgusting out of a Harry Potter movie. And the novice will be some tiny little weak neural pathway, like a little baby spider's web. And ultimately in elite performance, the winner or the person who performs the best will be the one who has the most sophisticated mental structures. So the most sophisticated skills. And these are very real things you can see in your brain. But obviously because we can't see them, like we can see like a set of biceps or something like that, it's not so obvious. But when you're in that blue head state, we've got something in our brain called a critical faculty barrier, and it's wide open. And you effectively gain complete access to all your skills. So everything you've ever done, every moment of excellence you've ever had is a reflection of what you're capable of. The challenge will be, can you flick the switch when it's time and open that critical faculty barrier and access the skill that you have? So that's challenge one, and that's skill one I need to develop with the elite performers I work with. And it doesn't matter what you are, that skill is that skill, whether you're, again, world champion, a boxer or super trader. The second aspect is what I'd refer to as the control switch, because there you are up in blue head, everything's going well, then all of a sudden you get an almighty kick in the pants, and no one gets to avoid this. So that could be some market news breaking, it could just be some tech failure, it could be like some personal shit with a partner or just life stress. Or, in sport, it could be the referee giving you a bad decision, so on and so forth, the risk manager giving you shit, whatever, like 1,000,001 things. But what that can do is it can send us what I call into red head. So in this state, we're still putting out full power. We're still concentrating on the task at hand. But now there's some negative emotion attached to it. So frustration, anxiety, anger, irritability. And what happens there is our blood flow switches from our conscious and unconscious brain, which is unconscious I've just talked about, is the seat of where all that elite performance flows from. And we switch that blood flow to our emotional brain. And we switch out the big 6 neurochemicals for the 3 stress hormones, cortisol, noradrenaline, and adrenaline. And that basically triggers this fight or flight mentality. And what happens is 2 things there. The first thing that is catastrophic for performance is that critical faculty barrier I talked about, bang, slam shut. So temporarily you lose access to all your skill that you've spent 20, 30 years developing. So when you see the athlete choke or the golfer choke on the 18th hole, you see the super trader or top investor make some terrible decision. It's not that they've technically suddenly just got shit and forgot how to make a good trade or stick to their principles or swing a golf club or take a penalty. It's that temporarily they've become a novice again because they've lost access to that ability that's scored in their unconscious mind. So that's the second skill. We need to build control switches so that, number one, we want to reduce the probability of going in there, but like life's life, like everyone's going in there no matter what. So we need to also then train people to become aware, like, oh shit, I'm going into here, because awareness is the first step in terms of flicking the switch back to blue head. But then thirdly, we need to develop routines and capabilities and that skill to be able to be like, oh shit, this has happened, bang, but I'm conscious of it. I've got a routine. I'm going to control my thoughts and actions, which are going to deduce my behaviors, my thoughts, my feelings, and bang, I'm back in blue head and performing again. And then last but not least, mate, the other side, of course, of training and competing is rest and recovery. So the third skill I want from a psychological perspective, again, whatever the domain, is that when it's time, well, the other side of competing and training is that recovery, restoration. So as soon as you finish training and competing, I want you to bang, flick the off switch, and I want you to stop expending energy, stop expending attention, and I want you to feel good. And this is where we sharpen the axe, because the training, the competition, the trading all day, the experiences you have there are the catalyst. The stress you get there is a catalyst for your brain and body to adapt to a superior level. But that adaptation only takes place in what I would call that green head state, where we're taking time to rest, and obviously on a physical perspective, that's sleep, nutrition, hydration, but emotionally, that's emotional detachment from the activity. Mentally, it's switching focus between left, right hemisphere, and for lots of people, the spiritual aspect. I'll take a breath there, though. But yes, it's the same.
I mean, there's a lot we can unpack here for sure. There's so many different ideas there, but You told me first about the learning process. So how do we actually learn and get to a good level in trading or like any other field? Tell me how that works out. Like how can people learn to become good traders or master any other field?
Yeah, that's such an important question, mate. Well, look, there's almost the first step before you start learning is actually making sure you're pursuing the right goals in the first place. Because when you study outlier performers, there's one mechanism they all align with more than anything else. And in psychology, it's what we call self-concordance. It's born out of what we call self-determination theory. And the basic premise is this: you have a sweet spot, and to excel, the goals that you pursue and the way that you pursue them must align with the qualities that make you unique. So this starts with, just like a baseball bat has a location at which the ball rebounds at a greater velocity if struck at any other point, so do you. So before we start training, we need to make sure you're pursuing goals you're optimized to pursue in the first place. So your sweet spot exists at the intersection of three things: your strengths, the things that come naturally to you; your interests, the things you're instinctually drawn to; and your values, the things that are most important to you. And if you don't pursue goals that align with these traits, then it's very hard for you to access that blue head state. Because the secret behind concordant goals is they tie in what we call your dopaminergic incentive reward system. And this is the evolutionary mechanism that compels you to move forward confidently and assertively in the face of, overwhelming odds. And it's effectively what triggers those big six neurochemicals to come online in the right sequence, right time. So it's not that people aren't born with or don't have the confidence, motivation, resilience to excel. That, we all know that's what drives elite performance across time, right? Exhibiting those behaviors and those emotions. But the key thing is to make sure that you pursue goals that enables you to activate that in the first place. There aren't people that don't have that part of their brain. There are just people pursuing goals that fail to activate those traits. So we need to, when it comes to your trading, it's really important to identify what are my technical strengths. So just like if we were going to take you to an Olympics, we might look at your physical anthropometry and be like, okay, you've got a hip to knee ratio that's like this, and you've got lungs the size of an ocean. We're going to stick you on the rowing machine, mate, because you're going to be able to generate so much force and propel so much forward movement. You've got a high probability of winning a gold medal. And we don't tend to take that approach in the knowledge working world, even though it's exactly the same as sport. But just like an athlete has a physical anthropometry, and the anthropometry required to be a heavyweight boxer is going to be very different from a jockey, it's exactly the same in the cognitive realm. So there's certain styles of trading that are going to require certain cognitive strengths. So it's really important you understand, and you can do a bunch of cognitive test batteries that will indicate what are your cognitive strengths and where are they an advantage in terms of what specific styles of trading. Because trading and investing is broad, right? It's a bit like saying I want to play sport. There's so many different styles. So that's why the strengths are so important. You need to understand what they are. Also, the psychological piece, we also have, we send some links out to in terms of psychometric profiling, but you have personality strengths and weaknesses, and these are hardware features, right? So we need to get them right. And almost every trader I work with who's maybe struggling, one of the first things I'll get them to do is to do one of these personality profiles, and I'll look at the weaknesses associated with that profile, and it's hilarious. It's uncanny how the errors you're seeing in their trading always directly link back to their personality strengths, their hardware glitches, and where there's just not alignment because something's changed, and now the way they're trading, whether that's in the market, in the setup, with tech, but now it's actually causing a weakness that they've had to become a potential threat, and it's affecting their trading. But it helps us zero in and fix that and apply constraints. But the reason, of course, pursuing goals that leverage your personality and cognitive strengths are so important is they're going to dictate your responsiveness to training. So if you've got more strengths than me, then every 2 hours of trading time we spend trading, and you're going to experience 2 breakthrough moments and I'm going to experience 1. A year from now, you're going to be so far ahead of me, I'm never catching you up. So that's why strengths are so important. And they're going to dictate the role or the style of trading you engage in. So you need to get clear on who you are and where you're optimized first there. The next bit would be the interests. So interest are the things we're instinctually drawn to. And the reason interests are so important are that, you don't have to motivate a child to play. If you're sincerely interested in oil derivatives contracts, it's not hard to study them all weekend, right? So it's like within the trading space, are there areas you're specifically interested in? Like, I just like the tech. I just like the fundamentals of this market. I just love US equities. I just love, whatever it might be, right? You'll know what that is. But when you pursue interests, you are effectively able to, I would say, almost outstruggle the rest, because it gives you staying power. They're like an anesthetic to the unrelenting immersion required to excel in a single specific area. So it's obviously a massive edge. The third aspect, of course, is your values. So the things that are most important to you, and your values will dictate the intensity you bring and the odds you're prepared to face. You bring the blood, sweat, and tears to achieve all your goals in trading, because they fulfill your values. So you need to work out, well, what is important to me in terms of my career? And, that will probably dictate where you trade. So whether you're a retail guy at home, because you don't want that big corporate pinstripe suits, the skyscraper, bureaucratic, political structure. Other people love that. If that's what's important to them, a high base salary, lower bonus, but go work at an investment bank in London or New York. If you want true meritocracy and the opportunity to compete, to try things out real fast, then maybe you're going to go the retail end. And there's obviously 1,000,001 places in the middle there, but your values will genuinely dictate the organization you work for. So before we get to the training, that we need to sort that bit out right. But if it's all right with you, I'll now jump to the training question you answered.
Yeah, well, do you have any favorite tests or things people can do to figure this out, figure out the strength, the personality first?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I'll do is we'll put them in your show notes. So we'll send some links to some cognitive test batteries and some free online tests that people can do. So we'll make sure we get those in there for people to try, because you got to do this. If you're serious about your performance, you need to get that. Who you are and where you're optimized is the first problem you need to solve. And you need to be performing from your sweet spot.
So important, because a lot of people, they just jump in straight, then try to copy someone else that's out there already without figuring out their own style first.
That's the key word. That's where most people go wrong. It's that reasoning by analogy. They look at something and they see, especially in trading, right? You see the movie version of trading and it's like, okay, cool. It's sexy, it's exciting. And then you copy paste someone else's recipe. You cannot copy paste your way to elite performance. You need to break your own problems down to their own basic elements and then reassemble them from the ground up. And that starts with understanding who you are and where you're optimized, because that will dictate the goals you pursue and the way you pursue them. And this is a big sort of, I guess in society, we're often told this, you can be anything you want to be if you put your mind to it. And it's bullshit. You can't. You can get better at anything, but you can't excel at anything. And unfortunately, if you're not at the top end in trading, you're probably not even making money, let alone making a lot of money. We know what that distribution curve looks like in terms of success and profitability. So you need to get this right. And it's this, instead of, you can be anything you want to be, we need to switch our transition and focus towards you can be a hell of a lot more of who you already are. It starts with working that out.
Sounds good. Yeah, then tell me the next step. How do you actually get better and learn trading?
So that bit's the most important bit, right? Get the hardware right. Once we've got the hardware optimized, we need to then focus on the software. And people get this wrong. There were plenty of people who had the same level of concordance or were performing from their sweet spot as, say, Cristiano Ronaldo and Elon Musk or Paul Tudor Jones, that didn't excel, and to the extent they did at least. And it's because they failed to get this skill acquisition bit right. So this acquiring skill. And, I talked earlier about how skills are stored in your brain as advanced mental structures. Right? The sole purpose of training is to create advanced mental structures. If we were to play the mental arithmetic game now, and I go 2 times 2, bang, hopefully the number 4 just popped into your head. Okay, it's unconscious, automatic, there's no thinking. That's elite performance, right? Well, when you watch a top trader make a decision in split seconds, that's what's happening to them, because their mental structures for that complex decision are as sophisticated proportionately to mine and yours for the 2 times table. So if we were to carry on and play this mental arithmetic game, the winner between you and I and everyone listening would be the individual with the most advanced mental structures for mental arithmetic. The first misconception we need to dispel when it comes to skill is 10,000 hours rule. I hate it. It's horrible. It's one of the problems with journalists writing books on human performance. They sort of cherry pick interested, they do a superficial skim of the research and then cherry pick findings that will make it for a great chapter title or so on and so forth. And that study with 10,000 hours was based on one set of violinists. There were 14 participants. One actually did it in 2,700 hours. Another one took 28,000 hours. In the meantime, was actually about 11,500 hours. So what we would do in human performance, by the way, is identify the outlier. So the individual that did it in 2,700. And the question we ask is, what were the causal mechanisms that enabled that individual to perform at a much higher level with much less training dose? And the fact is we obviously, then we break down, examine those conditions. And of course, that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. One of them, of course, is that concordance piece. The next bit is skill acquisition piece. And when it comes to skill acquisition, it's not the time spent training that matters most. It's the time spent training under specific conditions. And there are 7. I won't go into them all today, but I think there's 2 or 3 that are probably super important. And first and foremost, again, is you need to understand what it takes to win in your style of trading. And then you need to proportionately focus your effort there. So, for example, in tennis, 86% of points are won through the first serve, the return serve, and the second serve. Successful tennis players will proportionately focus their training there. And one of the exercises I encourage any trader to engage in, and when I'm screening any trader and potentially hiring or going to work with, there's sort of 5 key questions I'd encourage them to answer. And the first one would be like, I want to understand your decision-making process for placing a trade, whether you place one a year or one every 10 minutes. And that's, how do you decide what to buy? How do you decide when you're going to buy it? How do you decide how much you're going to buy? When do you decide you're going to sell for a profit? Or how do you decide you're going to sell for a profit? And how do you decide you're going to sell for a loss? And if you can't answer those questions to me, you don't have a clear strategy. And a world-class trader for me will be able to go bang, 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 bang. And if you can't, I recommend you sit down and you start writing out those for the various styles of trading you engage in. The second thing I think is really important is, look, these advanced mental structures, you know, they have to come from you. Coach can explain it to you, but they can't understand it for you. So when you're forced to summon your own solutions, the practice literally changes you. And this is where learning by doing comes in, even if it's with small size or demo accounts. But you have to, as quickly as possible, go from theory to practice, like start trading, even if it's with small size. And then reflect and learn on what you're learning. You need to think, do, produce, not memorize, recite, repeat, okay? Because that doesn't change your mental structures. That just goes in your short-term memory and out the other side. And that's why you don't remember shit from all that stuff you studied at school, because it goes in there and out the other, because it's just rote learning. And so many traders just engage in that same style of learning. So we need to switch that up. We want to create simplified simulations of the real thing and do it as quickly as possible. And when you start to have those sparks or those breakthroughs, or you're in the shower that night or walking the dog the next morning, you're like, bang! What's actually going on there in your brain is you're literally laying down a neural pathway that's advancing and sophisticating your mental structures. So that's super important. And I'd say the next thing I'd focus on is like, look, it's your future, your career, and it's your responsibility. Therefore, you take the lead in it all. I'm a partner in a hedge fund, a derivatives trading house, and a wagering syndicate. And the first message we say to everyone joining any of these organizations is that you know, that's the deal. We're all assets in your environment. We're going to give you everything, but it's on you. You have to drive your own performance. And if you can't do that, you need to come back and question whether you're truly concordant with the goal you're going to pursue. Because, look, performance is a cruel mistress. And the thing I love about trading, but the thing that makes it brutal, is that the winner takes it all. And if you're going to play the game, you need to be all in, or you at least need to be prepared to go all in. And fundamentally, taking complete ownership for your development is a fundamental aspect there. I think the next thing that's really important in the skill side of things is you need to identify specifically where your skills are breaking down, okay? And then you need to design training or apply constraints that address that specific area that your skills are breaking down. This is all about understanding your problems so much that the solutions practically fall in your lap, okay? And if you can do that, that means you can be incredibly effective again with cranking your development trajectory nice and steep. And again, like back to a tennis analogy, if you're losing points or losing tennis matches because your second serve is weak, then practicing your first serve and return serve all day isn't going to make you a better tennis player. So you've got to be really strategic, and this is all about being as effective as you can rather than just being efficient and doing lots of stuff. It's about doing the right stuff, the stuff that really moves the needle for you.
And there's a lot there for sure. This is a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom there for sure that you show people. So yeah, I love that. You mentioned before about being able to like get in the zone for trading, like being in the zone, being able to focus on what you got to do, like being into it. How do you actually develop that? Is it like a few habits you do and then you're done with it? Or is it like something you got to practice over time?
Well, look, yeah, practice makes perfect. Like that ability to flick the on switch is a skill. And again, like any skill, it can be developed with the right strategy and effort. And the right strategy is what we just talked about. Number one, you need to make sure your goals are concordant, because if you've not got concordant goals, forget it. You're never going to be able to switch on, and you shouldn't be, because you're not prepared. If you shouldn't feel confident and motivated to do things if you're not prepared to do them. So it starts off with making sure you pick goals that you have an edge and you have a good chance of succeeding at. The second aspect, it would be what we've then just talked about in terms of technical preparation. If you're not technically prepared, if you don't have the capacity in terms of your skill to meet the demands that are going to be imposed on you in the market, then again, your brain's not going to give you those good chemicals, because it's going to protect you, because you're going to get your ass handed to you. And that's why we talk a lot about like visualization, meditation, affirmations, kale smoothies, Whoop bands, all this shit. And, I'm not like, yeah, fine, it's good, but it's only good, and that only comes, and I only, like the people I work with, I'm not talking about any of that shit until we're crystal clear on knowing exactly what your edge are in terms of your strengths, interests, and values, and we've designed high quality training, and you're engaging in it, where we know what it takes to win. We've designed simplified simulations, you're taking ownership of it, we're identifying where you're breaking down, we're then tweaking how we train, we're putting constraints in place to mitigate your weaknesses, we're structuring the way you trade so it accentuates your strengths. Once we're doing all that, and if you're doing the concordance piece and the training piece, the skill acquisition piece well, flicking the switch, that on switch when it's time to train and compete, should come very natural to you. And it's quite, and almost the opposite. If you haven't done those two things well, you don't have the capacity to meet your perceptions of the threats imposed on you, then you're gonna have stress, and it's gonna throw you in red head, and you're not gonna be able to access what you truly are capable of. Okay. However, every now and then, and this is an important point, when I talk about capacity and demands, what we're actually talking about is your perceptions of your own capacity and your perceptions of the demands imposed on you. So sometimes there can be glitches there. And when we look at the human brain and how it works, at any point in time, we've got 3 million pieces of information coming into our perceptual awareness. Our brain can focus on about 134 bits. And we have these series of filters that act like you can call it a mindset. Mindset is just a set of beliefs in your mind. But what they do is they filter that information, they distill it down. And, occasionally we have significant emotional experiences that can shift our perceptions of our own potential in negative ways. Whether it's a terrible drawdown or something happening in our personal life. And we can temporarily sort of reduce not temporarily, we can change, that can change the way we perceive what we're capable of. Okay. And that's just a perception. It's not a reality thing. So very occasionally a bit of the work I do, and it is about, okay, well, let's, effectively the brain and those filters are a bunch of sloppy, wet code. And, part of the role would be to like, look, where are there glitches? Have we got limiting beliefs here? Have we got inaccurate perceptions of what we're capable of? Are we overestimating? Are we putting the market and people we're competing against on pedestals here? Do we need to balance that out? So, it's almost like removing phobias. It's like, a bad drawdown or bad trading experience can maybe be like a kid getting bit by a dog, and then be like, all dogs are bad. And then we code that into our neurology. And then suddenly every time we see a dog, we're like, and we go into redhead and panic and lose access to all our skill, and then make terrible decisions. And it sort of reaffirms that narrative. And, my role there would be to identify that, okay, that's where the glitch is. Let's go in and let's fix the bug in that code. So we can perceive things from a fully integrated perspective, because dogs aren't just evil and scary and bad. Yeah, they can be that, just like the market can be that. But the dog's basically a metaphor for the market there, in terms of it's lots of things. It's the gift, it's the curse, it's everything. And you need to be fully conscious of them all. So that's where there can be some surgery required at times from a psychological perspective. And then, of course, yeah, there are some really good psychological skills training you can do. And again, I'll put some links up for you in the show notes, mate. But like, we've got some guided performance routines, and these are the sort of routines or conversations that I would have with a super trader, the athlete before his world title fight, if they're going into redhead. So it's like a guided performance routine to bring you back to blue. They can be really useful. There's also emotional control training, similar to meditation, but a bit more performance based than, hippie headspacey type stuff. But doing and engaging in these activities are a no-brainer for anyone who's a trader. I mean, some of the research is just nuts. Like even 10 minutes of emotional control training has been shown to reduce your susceptibility to cognitive biases by up to 60-70%, which is just fucking nuts, right? Like imagine if there was a pill that could do that, I'd be a trillionaire. There are tools out there, and we'll put some links up to them that people can try out. Visualization is another good one, but again, it's very often not done well. But we'll put some links up and people can try that out, because that can certainly help amplify and grease up that on switch for when it is time to deliver and deliver all your ability and talent.
Yeah, we'll have to do a second part on this for sure, like a follow-up or something, because there's a lot we have to unpack still. We can definitely talk about this for like hours, definitely. So tell me where people can connect with you or reach out or find out more about your work and how to work with you.
My website's jamesaking.com, on Instagram at jamesaking_, on LinkedIn at Accelerating Excellence, and YouTube at Accelerating Excellence. That's the title of the book I wrote. And yeah, I guess the problems I typically solve are at the individual level, kind of what we've just been talking about, that how do you identify where your sweet spot is? How do you design world-class practice? How do we remove any glitches in your code that are impeding your ability to perform? And then at the organizational level, it's more how do we predict superstars that aren't superstars yet? And it's a tough one for people running teams in this space particularly, because, the game's changed in terms of talent and motivating and identifying potential superstars. And effectively what we're talking about there is identifying concordant performers. And then again, how do we design training to get them up the curve, to make them functional, so ultimately we can generate alpha and win? That's the business we're in, right? Winning.
James, thank you for your time. I appreciate the advice you give to my listeners. There's been a lot to be covered, definitely, and we could talk about this for hours for sure. I appreciate your time here, and hopefully we can catch up soon and discuss more about that peak performance and achieving excellence.
100%, mate. Cheers, Etienne. And everyone get stuck in and start putting the science to work. Returns will be enormous.